In the decade since a half-dozen Pittsfield churches and related properties were closed as part of a diocesan-wide pastoral planning initiative, the challenge has been to find reuse for these former beloved sites. Reuse that not only brought funds to the Catholic community, but new uses for the betterment of the entire community. Steve Kiltonic has our story.
In 2008, as a result of an extensive diocesan-wide pastoral planning process, which involved input from lay people, priests, deacons, and pastoral ministers, parishes in Pittsfield were reconfigured. Monsignor John Bonzani made the announcement, citing a diminishing population, fewer people attending Mass, and financial difficulties. The Pittsfield region was the first to be restructured. Within the next 2 years, other parishes across the Berkshires also suffered the same fate. In the summer of 2008, 6 of the 10 Pittsfield churches held final liturgies, including St. Francis Xavier, St. Mary the Morning Star, St. Teresa, Holy Family, and Our Lady of Mount Carmel, along with its mission church, All Souls. Notre Dame and its elementary school had already closed in 2004. Since consolidation, many of the buildings have found a variety of uses, from conversion to other faith communities, housing, educational, retail, or in some cases, the building was demolished and the property reused. Jack Dill is the president and CEO of Colebrook Realty Services. Since 2005, Colebrook has exclusively handled all the transactions involving diocesan properties. Dill said the diocese is not just interested in the quickest transaction for the most money.
Value is important because typically those values, those dollars that are generated by a sale, remain in the community to support the remaining parishes. So, the economics are of course important, and time is also important because, as these properties are unused, there's a burden of care, maintenance, and very often property taxes. So time is, in some sense, an enemy as well. But the ultimate use is very important to the remaining parishes and the diocese.
Dill said there are certain obligations a potential buyer of a diocesan property must adhere to.
All of these properties are offered with a deed restriction, which is a permanent part of the deed. And I know this by heart since I'm so familiar with it, that the property will not be put to any use that's contrary to the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church in the sole judgment of the Bishop of Springfield.
The Pittsfield churches became available all at once during an economic downturn. Nonetheless, over the past 10 years plus, 11 diocesan properties have been sold in Pittsfield and approved by the deanery.
And I think in every case, we were able to achieve fair value. It took more time than we would have liked, but at the end of the day, the uses are uses that are accretive to the benefit of the community.
In 2004, Notre Dame was purchased by an artisan group which offered training for single mothers. A world-class weaver acquired the school and opened an apprenticeship that was successful until the company moved to Europe. In 2013, CT Management Group purchased it for $500,000 and converted it into an 11-unit apartment building. David Carver is one of the partners in the group. Over the past 8 years, he spearheaded the redevelopment of a number of diocesan properties in Pittsfield and across the Berkshires. In 2010, Carver's firm bought St. Raphael's in Williamstown for $400,000 and converted it into 8 units of market-rate housing. And in 2015, the group converted Holy Family in North Adams into 4 large 2-bedroom units. Carver's been renovating old historic buildings for decades, but churches are a fairly new market. He likes the creative design challenge they pose and also their strategic location.
We're always interested in large, historic downtown buildings that meet our investment criteria, which is downtown, has to be structurally sound, and have parking and have interesting architecture.
About a year and a half ago, Carver purchased the former Holy Family Church, which used to serve primarily the Polish community here in town. Currently, it's being rehabilitated into a series of upscale apartments called Powerhouse Lofts. Constructed in 1906, the complex was the original energy source for the Berkshire-Pittsfield Railway Company, the local trolley service. The trolley later moved, and in 1923, the Polish converted the building into a church. Carver plans to renovate the sanctuary interior into 10 one-bedroom units on 2 levels. In the former rectory and classroom, a 4- and 3-bedroom unit will be built.
It's always a challenge on the inside to adaptively reuse a building and subdivide it for office or apartments. But the challenge is always try to keep as much of the existing detail, as humanly possible. This hallway is a little bit of an example. You can see behind me that we're looking at the outside wall of a huge barrel arch sanctuary, and those walls were covered with paintings, murals, and beautiful architectural work.
Purchased for $290,000, Carver says rents will range from $1,200 up to $2,000 for the larger units. The grotto next to the church will remain. Across town on Tyler Street is Carver's most recent acquisition, the former St. Mary the Morningstar complex, which was purchased for $850,000 last year. The 2.6 acres consists of the church, built in 1942, along with the school building, former convent, and rectory. A few years ago, Dunkin' Donuts proposed to tear down the buildings. That's when Carver stepped in.
We proposed this to the city. They are very interested in the concept of saving the architecture and the cultural history that it represents and adding market rate housing to the community, which is desperately needed.
Carver plans to construct 29 1-, 2-, and 3-bedroom townhouse units in all 4 buildings. The exteriors will remain much the same. As with Holy Family, Carver hopes to keep much of the building's integrity intact.
On the inside, we try to carve out living spaces that respect the interior architecture, including some of the architectural detail that will reveal itself inside the apartments.
He expects construction to start this fall and take up to 2 years to finish. Monsignor Mike Shoshanovich served as the pastor of Holy Family, Notre Dame, and now St. Joseph, and was very involved in the pastoral planning process. Father Mike is pleased with the diocesan properties and their new uses.
St. Teresa's was torn down because there was a lot of water and ice damage, but they put up a beautiful new nursing home, Berkshire Place, which is an establishment in Berkshire County for over 100 years, has a new home and a lot of happy people. St. Francis was purchased by an African Pentecostal group, and they meet there on Sundays. That's their new home. All Souls became a nursery school. Mount Carmel houses the Brain Center, which just offers so much assistance to people with special needs. St. Mark's recently sold their school to Hillcrest Educational Center, and they renovated the whole school, and it's going to be used for children with special needs. I think all the properties were really put to good use. It takes some of the pain out of what happened.
Yeah. Now, when parishioners walk past their former house of worship, they can feel better knowing that their church is being used, as Father Mike says, for something good that the Lord would approve. Although the buildings may not belong to them anymore, the spirit of what took place in the buildings still exists. For Real to Real, I'm Steve Kiltonic.
And hopefully seeing properties back into reuse helps to offset the continued sadness that came from the consolidation of these parishes. Despite it all, there remains a great spirit among the Catholics who call the Berkshires their home.